Thank you for bearing with me. Hey, I had a weird childhood. Give me a break.
You are watching a master at work.
Yes. Yes. What's going on, friends? Sam Prentice back once again for part 2 of the tiny bike project. And of course, we have got a load of gear here now. Again, thanks to Rev Robotics, thanks to AliExpress, and a variety of other bits and pieces that are in a box just down here. But the bearings are here. These are 95, 75 by 10, and you need 10 of these big old suckers to get you going in regards to this project. Also, the other things that have arrived are the 3-to-1 gearboxes, the planetary gearbox kits. We need 2 of those, of course. The Spark Maxes, which are your ESCs, and of course these wonderful motors. So, without further ado, should we get straight into this one? Let's do it. Okay, so that's broached the front wheel situation. As you know, these are sandwiched together. There's PLA on the top, PLA on the bottom, and then you fire some screws into here. And then obviously it's wrapped in a beautiful TPU covering out, obviously outside of this. Now, previously on the tiny bikes, what I've done is I've had them in a configuration where it kind of goes like this. So these parts here are on the outside. Now, what we're going to do for this one is actually we're going to have these on the inside. So that would be kind of your left-hand wheel, and of course that way would be your right-hand wheel. Now, the way to dress these are by these little parts here. Now, if you've got this and you've already printed these bits out, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But they slot just in here. And then this part here, which is basically where you put your feet on, or originally you would have put your feet on, they just slot through here. Now, the way that this is all eventually held together is via a rod. So we have some of these rods here. They're, I think they're an 8mm rod, and basically they will just go through here, and you put a screw on the end of that, and then this basically fits into another part that looks a little bit like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle weapon, which I'll show you now. See? Told you. Anyway, the ninja weapon here basically will then sit on this side here, and that will go in, and everything gets screwed together. Now, what you'll notice on this part here is that there is space here for an 8mm square bolt as well. Hopefully you can see that just inside of that. So the idea is this will travel all the way to there. It will just catch onto that bolt. So you've got a connection here, and you've also then got a connection there, which basically brings everything tight and together. Okay, so if we look back on the Fusion model as well, you should see that here. So these are these parts here. So again, you've got that sandwiching of this piece of PLA, that piece of PLA, which effectively are the wheels. And then of course you've got the tire. You've got this part here, and that then slots into this part here. Now, eventually, of course, we then have this middle part, and all we're going to do is mirror those 2 pieces together. So there'll be one rod that will basically connect this part, and one rod that will connect that part. Then there's another rod that then comes in and basically connects this part here into here. And then there's basically a screw or a bolt that goes into the bottom of this as well. Okay, so next we're going to slot this in. Now, this is kind of like the wheel hub. And essentially all we're going to do here is we're just going to make sure that we are going in the right direction for the wheel. So this is definitely the right wheel, and this is the left. And the reason we know that is because the arrows are pointing forward. So all we're going to do is make sure this part is at the back. And we're just going to slot that, hopefully, in like that. And then the same on the other side, with a bit of luck. Just like that. And then what you should get right in the middle here is you should have a hole that you can slide the next piece of rod through. Basically, you'll see on these parts that there is a hole, and those bits basically interconnect. So that is the front of the bike, or certainly the wheels. Done. So while we are talking about wheels, the single or double wheel, as you can see here, is again dressed in a TPU tyre. Again, in part 1, we did explain how to print this to ensure that it stays on the rim. Additionally, we are also adding 2 95, 75, 10 bearings to each side of this wheel. Then by adding the tyre rim wall with some 3mm screws. They are there basically just to hold the tyre in place. Now, the lengths of the rods here will be listed below, but to be honest with you, it might just be worth you buying some 500mm lengths and cutting them down, as it does, in most cases, work out to be cheaper. And quickly, while you are processing that last part, I am using 3D Gloop here with this project. You don't have to, but I will say that 3D Gloop does create a chemical bond for these parts, and strength is, well, going to be very important with this build, so please consider your options. And again, the seat hinge here just attaches otherwise with 4 3mm screws. So as I've probably mentioned before, I think now we're on version number 7, and there have been various iterations on actually how to put these things together. That, of course, being the case, should never be overly complicated. So we're handing over to the Offset Maker team for just the tip.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Poran with Offset Maker Lab with another edition of Just the Tip, here to provide you with timely advice on your Print My Ride project. Now, over to the boys in the lab for a tip on assembly.
This goes like this,
That
right?
was for the original one.
What do you mean?
No, that's for the original one up there. This one,
Yeah.
it's the beef bike. It gets the extension.
Oh. Are you sure?
No.
We should probably ask somebody.
Thanks, guys. Remember to refer to the instructions in Sam's videos, and don't be afraid to ask questions in the group. We're here to help. Back to you, Sam.
So that's right, depending on which version you're going for, are you going for the extended version or are you going for the shorter version? Now, if you are going for the extended version, which is the one I've got in the background here, well, that's for people generally with longer legs. I will say that the tiny bike isn't built for comfort, it's built for travel. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so the two parts you're going to need if you're printing the normal size bike, which is the red one that you may have seen. I'll put a picture up of it now. But basically, you're going to need to print this file and you're going to need to print that file. And once you've printed those, you're then also going to need to print the right and the upper and the joiner part here. Now, in addition to that, if you decide that you're going to go for the longer length, which is the one that I've got on the Prussia bike here, you will need to add these additionally. So these extra files will need to be printed in addition. Okay, so those parts will all interconnect. Print those. Obviously, we can't fit it all on one build plate, but if you print those, they will basically interconnect into these parts here. So these have been designed to be reasonably intuitive. So as long as you keep your left and right print parts together, you should be okay. Any problems though, of course, you can reach out to us on Facebook. One great tip around this point is going to be dry fitting the motorized elements prior to installing the rev motors. Once you have familiarized yourself with the bolt lengths and how the 3D printed parts go together, it should set you in good stead for maintenance needed, as the bike has been designed to be accessible to any of the parts in less than 10 minutes, so pulling out gears or changing parts should only be a few bolts away. So far though, of course, we have only concentrated on the front and mid section of the bike. So once you have the seat and potty put together, you should be ready to start thinking about installing the gears, motors and the cables. However, at this point, if you are finding that any of the installed parts have slop in the bearings, then you might need to adjust the tolerances of the print or pack the parts. I tend to use electrical tape to ensure a nice tight fit.
There's no brakes.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
So coming back around to it again, each of the wheels have two bearings. So 1, 2, 3, 4. In this part where the steering column comes into, there's 5 and 6. And then, of course, we've got 2 more wheels on the back. 7, 8, 9 and 10. So 10 bearings altogether, 95, 75, 10. So the good news is we are starting to break the back of this now, which is great. The next element is going to be around the motor and gearbox assembly. Now, if you are going to be looking for the electronics element, that is going to be in the next video. But before we go anywhere else, top tips, or just the tips, should I say, from Offset Maker Lab.
Hi, I'm Stephen Perron with Offset Maker Lab with another edition of Just the Tip, here to provide you with some timely advice for your Print My Ride projects. Now, over to Ryan in the machine shop on a tip for preparing your shaft. Ryan?
Nice.
Thank you, Ryan. Remember, be sure that the hexagonal shaft is completely seated into the planetary base bracket before marking your cuts. This has been another edition of Just the Tip. Back to you, Sam.
Thank you, Stephen, you handsome man. Now, if you do have a problem with your shaft, there is very little that you can do about it. I, for example, have a very long shaft here, but the shaft that you get in the packet will be slightly shorter. Now, the good news is Michael Badley has prepared a little device here. Now, this device allows you to slot this over your shaft and basically mark where your cut is going to be and also where you're going to be drilling your hole. Now, getting this wrong fundamentally will completely mess this entire thing up and you'll have to order another shaft. So let's not make that mistake. The other tip that we're going to make sure that you understand as well is something that I've just done is make sure you Loctite your screw into your shaft. Let me explain. So this is the rev motor, and laying it on its back, I'm then going to place the universal input stage on top. There are 2 bolts that you will use to secure this into place. Next, you'll take out the planetary 8mm input coupler, paying special attention to the key, which is a small piece of metal that locks the coupler into the motor shaft. Insert the key into the shaft before lowering the coupler into place. Next, take your chosen gearbox, and in my case it's a 3-to-1, and place it on top. Placing it on top, you might need to wiggle it around a little bit just to make sure that it locates correctly. Next, we're going to add the hex socket output part. This is the part that we are referencing to that you need to pay special attention to by using Loctite to keep the shaft from becoming loose. It's very much at this stage that you should be adding your Loctite to that screw. I didn't in this case, and well, I had to add it later. Again, you might need some movement for the output to locate itself, then using the provided screws, tighten upwards to sandwich the parts together. While I haven't found the need for Loctite on these parts, you may choose to do so if you wish. Unlike the guys and girls over on the Offset Maker team, I don't have access to a pillar drill, so instead I'm going to use my Dremel to cut the shaft, and then a hand drill and a metal bit to drill the hole. I have covered the motor with a bag to protect it from any metal cuts getting into the gearbox. The helpful divot will certainly be your friend here, and just make sure you don't make that mistake. The drilled hole should equal around about 6mm, and what I've been doing is using a bolt screwed into the aluminium shaft and then cutting off the head before placing the 3D printed part on top. The result should end up something like this. Next, we just add the motors and basically bolt 3 M5 bolts through here into the countersunk holes to attach it. So what I've tended to do when I've bolted the motors on, I've made sure that the electronic tails basically face in the upwards direction towards where the pot is, because you're going to need these parts to be relatively close to where the electronics are going to be. If you've got the motor that's spun around the other way, it's going to look a bit weird. Now, the good thing is that if you do need to make any subtle adjustments, you can make those relatively easy. But when you're putting these bits together, it's really important that these parts are facing sort of towards the back and heading towards the potty and obviously the seat. All right, I think we might be coming towards the end of this video. Now, there were a couple of things that did sort of jump out at me when I was building this. Making sure that when you do the dry fit that you've got certain things printed in the right orientation. For instance, the smaller gears, one of them is for the left, one of them is for the right. Don't just take the same one and replicate it twice, because it will probably be the wrong one on the other side. So just make sure that you've got all of those parts ready to rumble. Now, don't go plugging all the electronics in if you don't know what you're doing. Wait for the next video, or at least tentatively go through it very slowly. Make sure that you've got free row of motion. The ESCs do need programming in order to make this kind of relatively safe. So there's different things that we've kind of set up, and there's going to be iterations that we move forward with as well. It's super easy to do the electronic uploads. All you need is a Windows computer, which is something that I don't have, so I have to borrow one in order to do the programming. But we will give you the files for those as well. We'll upload them to the Discord and various other places as well, and obviously the Michael Badley Patreon as well. So again, thank you to Prusa. These parts were all printed on the Prusa XL and the Mark IV, and now the new Mark IVS. If you haven't seen that video, go and check it out. Electronics are up next. If I have missed anything, I'm really sorry about that. Discord, Facebook, any questions, any comments, pop them down in the comment section below. I think that's it. Thank you to all the people that have been involved with this, including the Offset Maker team, Michael Badley, Prusha, and anybody else that has been inclusive into this. Again, any questions, and I've had a few today, and again, sorry if I've missed anything on the last video, but I'll keep updating and we'll keep iterating. There are really small things that maybe are updated and changed, but they shouldn't really have any kind of adverse effects into what you're building. So if you've already printed the parts, don't worry about anything. They will all work, but we're just iterating things and just changing around a few things just because we can. It's 3D printing after all. Guys, thanks for watching. We will see you next time. Bye for now.
You are watching a master at work.